Welcome back to the Insight into Industry. My name is Mayur Krishna, and I'm a third-year pharmacy student at the UNC Eshelman School of Pharmacy. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Amey Shroff, who is a leader in commercial marketing at Gilead Sciences. Amey graduated from the University of Michigan School of Pharmacy in 2017, completed a commercial fellowship at Janssen, and has worked in competitive intelligence and marketing throughout his career in companies like Genentech and Gilead. I had the opportunity to learn from Amey during my internship at Gilead and was lucky enough to have him agree to be on the podcast. So thanks for joining me, Amey.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Mayu.
For sure. Yeah. And I guess to get started, could you tell the viewers a little bit about your career journey and how you've gotten to where you are now?
Yeah, sure. So I'll start with pharmacy school, as that's where I anticipate a lot of your listeners are. Throughout pharmacy school, I think I knew that I wanted to work in a setting that was, I didn't know industry at first, actually. I knew I didn't want to work in a hospital. I didn't want to work in community. And so I started my exploration into all the different non-traditional spaces of pharmacy. Through the 4 years of school, I met with a lot of different advisors and tried to tap into some of the knowledge that they had and started to understand that industry was a place where I could potentially make a lot of impact. And it was also kind of aligned with my way of working, which is very project based. I like getting things done in really digestible time periods and pieces, and then moving on from there and feeling like I achieved a goal. And so industry really started to align towards my P3 and P4 year. Through my P4 year, I engaged in a few different industry or pseudo industry kind of rotations to ensure that I was best prepared to get a fellowship. And the fellowship process, through the fellowship process, learned a little bit more about where my interests lie. I initially was excited about HEOR and potentially, engaging in this research that I described as kind of the language of value in industry. And so from there, during the interviews, I actually pivoted and learned that the strategy piece was actually where I really wanted to play, and utilizing those pieces of data in a way that we can best position our products was kind of where my interest lied. And so from there, identified a few different fellowships that fell into that category. Originally was not actually considering marketing, so it's funny ending up here. I saw the marketing people as a little bit too salesy, and really far away from our pharmacy degree. But I ended up getting a fellowship in competitive intelligence, and here's my plug for competitive intelligence. I think it's a great starting place for anyone that's joining industry, because you're essentially at the crossroads of medical, commercial, clinical development. And what you're doing is you're learning what's going on in the landscape that your company is working in. So, for example, for breast cancer, you're learning what your competitors are studying, which patient populations they're studying, and how they're marketing their products to those patient populations and the treaters in that patient population. You're bringing those insights into your company and providing context to the work that your company is doing. And so you're going to enter into those spaces a lot more protected because you know what's going on. And so CI was a fantastic place to start my career. I started in schizophrenia through my Janssen fellowship, and then was able to move back to California, where I'm from, and worked in competitive intelligence at Genentech, where I expanded to oncology, a much faster moving therapeutic area. And then from there, moved to Gilead Sciences within global competitive intelligence, then so expanding further from US to global, and also continuing to stay within oncology. And so from there, I started thinking about what's next. As you'll probably hear from a lot of industry people, every 2 or 3 years, people are considering, what's next for them. And for me, I really wanted to take the insights that we were gathering as a CI team and apply some execution to them, to learn how to utilize those insights to position our products once again. And so was able to make the transition over to the marketing team, where I've been for the past 4 months, and it's been a fantastic experience, and I'm learning more and more every day.
Yeah, it's an amazing journey, crossing multiple functional areas, and I think that's something that I see myself doing in the future. Trying to see what's next in a career. I think that's something that's important to do. And also, I also I'm aligned with how you thought in the beginning of your pharmacy school experience. wanting to do something longitudinal, project based is something that I saw in the industry, and it's something that's different than other areas in pharmacy, like for example, retail or clinical. I think that's another, that's another plus for me. It did fit my personal and personality
And
as well.
and I think there it's really important what you touched on there is like that self-awareness, right? To be able to know yourself and say, okay, this is the type of work, this is the way I like to do work. Because in the end, you're gonna have, a long career. And as much as we'd like to, retire at 30, a lot of us can't do that. And
Yeah.
so learning how you can get the most out of yourself is important. And so yeah, would definitely recommend that. It's just like a general insight for your listeners.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And retiring at 30 and then moving over to California, that's something I wish I could do. Yeah, I wish you could do as well. But I guess on that note, you have worked on the East Coast, you've worked on the West Coast. I was wondering what types of differences you've seen in East Coast pharma versus West Coast.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'll talk a little bit about maybe company structure and how what I've seen from like a company perspective in East Coast versus West Coast, and then I'll also talk about just opportunities in general on either coast. So number one, companies, you know, you have quite a few companies on the East Coast. I think if your desire is to work in a headquarter role in industry and not a field role, I think there's more opportunities on the East Coast. And the companies are generally, what I've noticed at least, are a little bit more traditional American corporate companies where there's a lot of hierarchy. Um, in certain cases, this might be really good because you have a very defined role, you have a great kind of defined structure as to your leadership. The downsides of that can sometimes be hierarchy. So some of the companies, I've heard about, having to walk the square. So even when you have a project that, you feel you should be empowered to do, sometimes it takes a little bit to get everyone's buy-in on that project. And that comes with having a lot of layers, and making sure that everyone is kind of aligned to what you're doing. So I noticed that a little bit in the East Coast when I was working there. On the West Coast, what I've noticed is, especially in the Bay Area, a lot of the pharma companies here try to mimic the culture of some of the technology companies here, where you have a little bit of a flatter organization. You have a much more laid back kind of work environment where, on the East Coast, I never would have dreamed of wearing, jeans to work.
Yeah.
So like, just talking about some of the smaller details like that. But at Genentech, it was like, if you wore a suit to work, people thought you were interviewing for another role or something,
Yeah.
like they're like, hey,
Yeah.
where's your jeans and your t-shirt and your jacket? It's
Yeah.
so culturally there's definitely some differences, and you see that come through in how you do work as well. So I think that there's less hierarchy in some of the companies here. Um, there's a little bit more of like a focus on innovation over here on the West Coast. But alternatively, I think innovation just happens a little bit more freely on the East Coast just because there's a lot of competition over there. But definitely, like, it's one of the key things that companies on this side of the country try to focus on.
Yeah.
In terms of, I think I touched on this, opportunities, there's definitely a lot more opportunities on the East Coast. And so despite being from the West Coast, I recognize that if I wanted to work in industry, I think eventually I would need to make my way over to New Jersey, New York area for some period of time, considering the roles I wanted, which were in-house. And so another kind of piece of advice for your listeners that, maybe don't be married to a geography unless you have some specific, family or other issues. Uh, Keep yourself open to as many opportunities geographically as you can, and then kind of as you develop your career, you can start making those decisions where you want to live a little bit more important.
Yeah. And would you say, I guess, some of those differences between East Coast and West Coast may be due to some of the bigger pharma companies being on the East Coast? So, and also, I guess, some of the more mid-size and smaller companies starting closer to startup companies being on the West Coast driving innovation. Do you think that might have some sort of an impact?
Yeah, I think so. I think On the West Coast, it's tough to say though, right? Because
Yeah.
Genentech being part of Roche
Yeah.
is one
Yeah.
of the
Yeah.
largest pharma companies
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
the world. Um, but yeah, I think it's just the culture over here. I've never worked in Southern California, but I know
Mhm.
that's where a lot of the biotech innovation came from, La Jolla near San
Yeah.
Diego. And so down there, I think there's definitely a even further kind of innovative mindset that you have in different smaller companies that ends up making its way up to Northern California. Um, but yeah, I think it's mimicking a lot of the technology companies around here. A lot of the people that I work with have spouses that work at Facebook and Google
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
Uber, and so
Mhm.
the work styles kind of start to bleed over into the pharma companies here as well.
Yeah. No, and it's great to know, especially if you're considering working on either East Coast or West Coast. That culture and the day-to-day living is really important. But yeah, I again, I guess going back to what you were talking about with competitive intelligence, I wanted to ask, what your thought process was when you were in competitive intelligence, and then how you made that switch to marketing. You did talk about it a little bit, but if you could go a little bit more in
Yeah,
detail.
sure. So once again, for those interested in a good entry level role that really allows you to kind of learn multiple different areas of industry, I think competitive intelligence is a great starting point. Um, it is a specialized role. So there's techniques, there's databases you need to learn that you typically, as a CI lead for a specific product or a specific indication for a product, you will be the only person focused on that. So there's definitely some benefit in being that specialized person, because when the questions come, you are the one that answers them, and there's nobody else that's really responsible for it. So it's really empowering to have, to be that only person. As you progress down that, though, the downside is you might get pigeonholed, right? Like if you want a long career in CI, you can definitely do that. You can go up the ranks. But then as you progress further and further from a title perspective, it's harder to make the transition into something else. And so for me, the diversity of different roles was really important.
Mhm.
And so, as I told you in the beginning, I was not interested in marketing at all, as I thought,
Mhm.
there were other drivers of value, and marketing was more of, a pseudoscience, in my opinion, at the
Yeah.
beginning.
Mhm.
I can be honest about my
Yeah.
opinions at the
Yeah.
beginning of my career. But as I've learned more, marketing is truly the ability to best describe the clinical value of a product in pharma. And so as I started learning that, I recognize that that is a really valuable skill for anything I want to do in the future. And so that's kind of how I made the decision to move over into marketing. From a CI role, you're essentially an internal consultant to marketing a lot of the times with the insights that you gather. And so through those experiences, I started learning how the marketers think, and the really interesting way in which they take all these different inputs and make a decision on where our product potentially needs to be positioned, or down to like the nuances of like the wording and like why it's important. I started really leaning into that, and wanted to do that, and wanted to kind of learn more from them. So that's how I made the transition into marketing.
Yeah. Yeah. Both great areas. I mean, competitive intelligence for me stands out because you have to know everything about like a specific, I guess, area, right? Yeah, like what all the other companies are doing, what their products are, how they're doing, when they have updates on trials, you have to be up to date on that. That I think is, be on the forefront of that area is really interesting.
I think more than know everything, just like you would in any other pharmacy role, you need to know where to find it fast.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I definitely did not know everything in every role, every CI
Yeah.
role, but I knew how to find it really quick, and I knew the important pieces. So it's a role that really aligns well with what we learn in pharmacy school.
Yeah, that's great. I guess going off of that, going back to pharmacy school, there are some pharmacy schools that are focused on clinical pharmacy compared to some of the others which are focused on industry. How would you advise pharmacy students who are in, clinically focused schools to learn more about the industry?
Yeah, sure. So there's multiple things you can do, and so I'll give just like a general list, but choose what's right for you once again based on your workload, your interest, and potentially the areas or the gaps that you want to fill in your specific experience. So I'll give some ideas from low effort to high effort, just so that you can kind of categorize them well. So number one thing I would recommend is get to know industry. And so the way you can do that is follow the news. So my recommendations are, reading Endpoints News, Fierce Pharma, and drugchannels.net. Those are my kind of three different news sources when I was in pharmacy school. Actually, I lied. Endpoints News wasn't around, but essentially just having a source for knowing what's going on so that you have context to what conversations are happening within industry. And so your goal in reading these should be to increase your functional knowledge of companies, products, and regulations that impact the industry so that when you go into those interviews for either a fellowship or a specific role in consulting or within industry directly, you'll have the vocabulary, you'll have the context of what's been happening in the industry if you continue to follow the news. And this is something you can do, as a break from studying for, whatever medchem exam you have or therapeutics exam. It's a really it's kind of a refreshing kind of step away, while still kind of learning and keeping yourself sharp. Second, I would say take some ready-made opportunities. So clubs like IPHO offer more formal opportunities to meet and discuss other like-minded, students and professionals in the industry. So wherever you have the ability to engage with clubs like IPHO, I would say definitely engage. I know they're always looking to deepen their involvement at every university or expand their opportunities at different universities. So if that's something you want to lead, that's another great example of showing leadership and while also increasing your touch points with industry. And then of course, something you've done, internships and rotations in industry. I mean, these are definitely competitive, and it's not guaranteed that you will get one, but shoot your shot and apply for these internships and rotations wherever you can. So that's a low effort, probably a medium effort. And then finally, I'd say a little bit more high effort, or will take a little bit more involvement from your part, is to engage specifically at your university of school. So most universities are doing research. So you can find out if there's a professor who's, asking the research questions that interest you, and you can go set up some time with them and get involved and ask them, hey, like, I'm really interested in your research. For example, when I was in school, there was a professor who was doing research on essentially using different companies, different consumer product companies' supply chains to get pharmaceutical products to third world countries. So he had written a paper about how to use Coca-Cola's supply chains to get cold, vaccines to rural areas in Africa. And I just love this concept of mixing supply chain with pharmacy and addressing the issue. So it took about a year and a half, with a lot of canceled meetings from his side, but I finally got in front of him and said, look, I'm super interested in your research. How do I get involved? And he was able to pull me into a modeling exercise that he was running. So essentially just a good plug for getting engaged and tapping into the resources and the people that are at your university. If there's no research opportunities, tap into your professors and their networks to meet and discuss their experiences in industry. Your professors are there to help you, and they've also had long journeys, in probably could have touched industry as well, or know people that are in industry or have those experiences. So tap into them, ask them specific questions, ask them for time beyond help in class, or just to chat about things, and I'm sure they'd be open to do that. So it takes a little bit more effort, but definitely something that will reap some benefits. And then I have a final kind of bonus thing to recommend. This isn't like a really a must do. This worked for me. It may not work for everybody, but I would say develop your thoughts on industry. And so but you're running this podcast, so you're kind of engaging with the ideas, which is really great. Everyone can kind of learn from experiences like that, and you don't need to make something extremely formal, but write your thoughts. Say, you're reading the news, you see Manjaro and all these new kind of GLP-1 agonists that are coming out. Write your thoughts on what you think their impact is going to be on, the future of the disease states they're treating, or the future of reimbursement for products that are a little bit more on the vanity side of things, with the weight loss. And so just develop your thoughts, write them down. Once again, all with a focus on those interviews that you might get for either an internship or a fellowship, so that you have the functional knowledge and you have your ideas developed, so you can clearly demonstrate your genuine interest in the industry.
Yeah. Yeah, and that last piece of advice is key. I mean, I've heard that just knowing the news and being able to talk about it, what's happening in the industry in interviews is what puts you ahead. What really makes you stand out. And it's something that I've done in the past, and I think it's really important to, reach out not only to professors, but also people who might be at your, I guess, might be around you, maybe also family members who are interested in the industry. I think just networking in that way is also important. But yeah.
And I want to say one more thing on that. I think for me, the advice I was hearing when I was in school made me feel like I really needed to like be my own cheerleader and like, really promote myself. Everyone talked about self-promotion. It took me a while to learn that self-promotion looks different for different people. And so I was thinking it was go to these professors and say, like, I'm the best. You should endorse me or do something to help me. But realistically, if you just lead with your genuine interest in what is going on in the industry, you're not going to read every article and be like, wow, this is so fascinating, but like you're going to find those areas that you are interested in. And so just lead with your genuine interest. And then, that will lead to self-promotion just naturally. So I would say the ideas that I just gave are essentially my journey into self-promotion from a more genuine perspective.
Yeah, I think that makes more of an impact too. And not everyone can do what you said, like go to a professor, say I'm the best, or like, and probably not everyone can do that. It just doesn't, it's not.
Still can't.
Yeah,
it's weird.
Yeah, it is. So I think genuine interest. That is the way to go. Find something that you can talk about and you're passionate about. Yeah. And I guess moving on from that question, I was wondering, from a commercial standpoint, some pharmacy students are interested in commercial, and there are many routes to commercial in the industry post graduation. For example, you pursued a fellowship, you can do a direct to industry role, consulting, and also there are commercial rotational leadership development programs if you are in an MBA program. So I was wondering how you weighed your options when you were deciding what to do, and what are your thoughts on some of the other paths?
My short answer to that question is yes.
Yeah.
So like I approached everything with the understanding that I applied for internships while I was in pharmacy school. I wasn't able to get any. And so I had a very realistic perspective on myself to say, okay, like I have competition. My competitors likely have resumes that might look better. They have industry experience that's actually on there and I don't. So for me, it was very much a numbers game. I shot every shot and said, I'm gonna apply to commercial leadership development programs. I'm going to apply to consulting, and I'm going to apply to pretty much every commercial fellowship that was available, except for marketing for some reason. But yeah. So my advice, and once again, this worked for me, this may not work for everybody, is to consider every option that's available to you. If you do already know, like there are certain things that you are not interested in, of course, like, do not apply there. But definitely like keep your options open. There's some things to say about each of these options, right? So for example, the fellowship route. The fellowship route is fantastic. There are some downsides, right? Most of them are 2 years and they don't pay extremely well. As inflation increases and the economic burdens of pharmacy school increase as well, you're going to have to do a kind of calculation of, do I think this will benefit me exponentially in the future to where my salary will make up for, the loss of essentially wages that I'm going to experience over these 1 or 2 years. So it's a calculation that people need to do. And for me, I was blessed to be able to do that, but not everybody's going to be in that position. So I would say, like, if you're able to get different opportunities, so you have, potentially offers from different things, that's when you have to start weighing them and say, okay, like, what's best for me? The consulting route is really interesting. I definitely highly considered it because the consulting route, you get to experience all different kind of a variety of different projects and a variety of different clients. The kind of balance of that is your work life may not be as balanced as potentially a fellowship. In fellowship, you're essentially working as an industry employee, and industry typically has a decent work-life balance. From what I've seen from colleagues who have done the consulting route, work is a little bit more intense. They work longer hours, and in some cases, they're traveling quite a bit as they're, just jumping from project to project. But the experience that you gain is really valuable, and the salary is going to be higher than a fellowship salary typically. I would say if you can get into a commercial like leadership program, I would say for me personally, if I were that early in my career at the, coming out of pharmacy school, I got that role and I knew I was interested in the commercial side, 100% take that over any other opportunity. The commercial leadership development programs within companies are coveted programs where they really invest a lot in you because they see you as a young leader who can potentially be, a future leader at their executive levels within the company. And so most pharma companies have these, and once again, they're very coveted. When I was at Janssen and we got an MBA candidate who was part of that leadership program on our schizophrenia commercial team, we were excited. We were like thrilled. We were like, we're going to have this celebrity, who's super sharp and he's going to really like help our business. And he did. He was fantastic. And so if you're able to secure a spot in those programs, definitely do that. The company invests an incredible amount into you, and they expect that you'll grow and absorb everything and eventually pay that back in dividends to the company. So I applied to those roles, didn't get any, unfortunately, but if I did, I would have taken that over any of the other opportunities I was exploring.
Yeah, and it seems like, I guess, the general advice is to see what options you have, try to narrow down as much as you can in terms of what you're interested in, and then apply to all of those. And I think that's a great piece of advice. And something that I'm definitely going to be taking in the future when I'm applying to these internships and also these roles post graduation.
Awesome.
And yeah, that's pretty much all the questions I had. We had this one question that we asked to all our guests. What is one singular piece of advice or insight that you would give to a pharmacy student who's interested in something that you're doing?
Yeah, I would say talk to everybody. Like, I know we've probably repeated it a couple times on this podcast, but for me, being so like open to many options. I had so many different things I was considering, and what really helped me is talking to different people and just having informational interviews with current fellows in different fellowship programs, with people in the industry, with professors, and getting their perspectives on what might fit with what I want to do in the future. And so I would say talk to everybody. And this really helped me during the mid-year process as well. So I had mentioned that I made a pivot during the mid-year meeting, and that was changing from HEOR focus to being a little bit more open to these commercial strategy fellowships. And that really occurred because I chatted with other students who were talking about HEOR and comparing it to kind of more the strategic fellowships. And that's where I started recognizing that, okay, I'm actually more interested in that side of things and potentially should be open to them. And so I'm so grateful for those conversations that I've had. And I'm still great friends with the people that I met during the mid-year process. but it all came down to just talking to people and just hearing their experiences, asking questions, and being open to any of their advice. So
Yeah. Yeah, I can't count how many times I have changed my entire like career path from just talking to one person. It's amazing. But yeah, the more people you talk to, the wider your I
yeah,
guess your experience can be. But
yeah.
yeah,
I guess
thanks
that
again.
brings up that.
Sorry.
Sorry, Mayor. I know you're trying to
No,
close, but
no, no,
that
no,
brings
no.
up a good point, right? Like it's not like you're not locked in, right? Like you're not locked into like once you go commercial, you're full commercial. Because we're pharmacists, I think we have this incredible ability to go into many different roles. And so just know that if you do find yourself going down a path that you think may not be right for you in the future, because we have such great experiences in the past in our education as well, having that PharmD on your behind your name is going to give you the fluid ability to move into different things. And so know that all these decisions seem really, really impactful and seem like you're going to send yourself off into one direction and can't go the other. But that's not true. You have, if you move into industry, you have a lot of fluid ability to move from medical to marketing to clinical development. It takes a little bit of time. It takes a little bit of, potentially, once again, marketing yourself internally and demonstrating your value, but you can do it. And so don't feel locked in. Be open to change.
Yeah, perfect. Yes.
That's all.
No, no, no. But yeah, no, I wanted to thank you again, Amey, for taking the time to come on the podcast. I know it is West Coast and I might be eating up on your lunchtime, uh, but thanks again, Amey. And definitely, I think some of our listeners can reach out to you if they have any questions as well.
Please do. Yep.
All right.
All right. Thanks, Mayor.
Thanks.